Righty. Welcome everyone to our community webinar, the second one for the month of October. Wait, is this October?
September.
September. I'm so sorry. I'm Deb Hogdon, if you haven't met me. My brain's a little fried from yesterday at the Legislative Office building with Cece and Jen here. I'm one of the co-founders of New Hampshire for Safe Technology. And 2017, I accidentally figured out I was affected by wireless, and through my journey met Cece and Jen, and we've been working together since 2018, I believe. And we've joined forces here to try to provide these community webinars to inform people so that they could have enough information so that they could empower themselves, their family, and their communities, and protect their families' communities with the information that we'd have to share so that they have choice with their technology. So, Jen, is there anything you want to say?
So similar to Deb, I have a sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. My journey started about 12 years ago, and I'll keep a long story short. That basically I've suffered through the last 12 years off and on with headaches and dizziness, heart palpitations, sleeplessness, ringing in the ears, lots of fun things, not really. Deb and I were at the legislative building yesterday, and we were there to support HB 1644, which is the setback bill. And we are both a little fuzzy today because of the high levels in the state building. So we're sort of having this aftermath of pressure headaches and tiredness and such. So you'll have to bear with us. But we're so passionate about this subject that we wanted to be here for you today to provide the information along with Cece and just plant the seeds and help you sort of see what we're doing here. And we're trying to really move the needle towards safe technology. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. I know that it's dinner time now and you're probably putting things on the back burner. So we really appreciate you being here, and thank you so much for your dedication. And I'm going to pass this over to Cece now. Thank you, Cece.
Let me just say a few things first. Two things: that there will be time at the end for any of your questions that you may want to ask. And so we would politely ask if you can refrain from asking them in the messaging so that everybody can focus actually on the presentation from Cece. And you will definitely be getting video recordings, all of Cece's links from her presentation at the end of this. So don't feel like if you miss something, you can't go back or you can't get an answer. You absolutely can. So you can just relax and appreciate everything Cece has to say. And let me just give a little introduction of Cece. Cece Doucette helped her children's schools become the first in the nation to take precautionary measures with wireless technology. She's the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology and works with schools, communities, municipalities, and legislatures, including ours, to address wireless radiation and public health. She's also the Education Services Director with the International Nonprofit Wireless Education, which offers affordable 30-minute online training for schools and families and corporate safety instruction. Cece was honored to co-chair the technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institute of Health and to present state and local policy at the International EMF Medical Conference. She's been featured on Genius of Wellness, Boston 25 News, PBS, EMF Warriors, and EMF Summits with Lloyd Burrell, Josh Del Sol, and Patrick Vandenberg, and in the films Generation Zap and Wi-Fi Refugees. And I know recently she's been in a billion other things too for other people that I don't have on my list, but I appreciate you all bearing with me as my mind is definitely affected from the Wi-Fi yesterday, as you can see physically, that it's a struggle for me. So welcome, Cece. We always appreciate you, and let's let her rip.
Oh, Jen and Deb, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And you guys are my heroes, you know, for you to knowingly risk your health to be there at the State House yesterday. I know it's going to take you several days for your biological symptoms to abate. And I saw that with other friends in Massachusetts when we were at our State House. And hopefully the work we're doing will get us one day to where we have safe zones throughout, or better yet, hardwired technology with no wireless radiation exposure inside of our public buildings, especially, and then let that trickle down through the rest of the community. So I'm so sorry that you guys aren't feeling your best today. And again, my hat's off to you for making the time to be here tonight. I kept trying to say, you don't have to be here. I'll figure out how to do the Wizard of Oz stuff in the background and present my slides. But I'm so touched by your commitment, and thank you for being here tonight. So I'm going to do a screen share, and we will spend some time going through. Oh, Jen, I see.
Yeah, I'm working on that now. Sorry.
Okay.
I've
Yeah,
got
I'm
you
disabled in
covered.
another way here. I'm sorry, I shouldn't make
I'm
that.
so sorry.
That's
Let's
okay.
see. Thank you everyone for being so patient with us.
Well, this is the fun of live TV, right?
Okay, Cece, you should be good now. Thank you.
Sure. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to make this go big. There we go. Jen, can you give me a nod if you can see my slides? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And there's a third co-founder of Massachusetts or of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, and that's Lori Schreier. She has been traveling, but she's also been another local hero in New Hampshire who's worked really hard on this issue and brought people into the conversation. So my name is Cece Doucette. That MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And like most folks, I had no idea we had to be concerned with wireless. But after a lot of really difficult conversations in my schools, we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms to turn these devices off when they're not using them, to turn the wireless on only when needed, and always place a mobile device on a solid surface, not your body. And again, recommendations: just keep your distance from a radiating device and screen. And then I worked with my senator, who is Senate President Karen Spilka now, to see what she might be able to do from where she sits, because it's really a right to know issue. And I didn't know how we could get this information out to the public. So Senator Spilka put me with a lawyer in her office, and together Aaron Carty and I whittled out a simple bill that would just simply bring the right minds together at the state level. That was back in 2014, and our first bill was introduced in 2015. And here now it's been 7 years. And although we've been fortunate to see some movement on some of our bills, we have never passed anything into law, which is why we're so very grateful to be assisting in New Hampshire, where we seem to be making some meaningful progress to move the needle to truly safer technology. And we'll go through the New Hampshire legislature in just a few minutes. As Deb mentioned, I've had the privilege of collaborating with many of the world's leading scientists and doctors and public health experts. And Dr. Mikko Ahonen from Finland and I, and our former partners, Brett and Lynn West, we put together a little schools and families course where literally we could train your entire schools in about a half an hour online. So just know the resources are here. We're migrating to a new platform right now, but we hope to have that back online very soon. But reach out if you think you want to bring us into your schools. And then for the longest time, like 2 years, I was the only person I could speak to about this, and I was still doing my research, and I wasn't even certain of what I knew. But then I continued to investigate the peer-reviewed scientific literature, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. And I realized when Dr. Deborah Davis brought a panel of experts to our state house in Massachusetts, that there were many people all over our state who actually understood this issue. And so ultimately, we formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology so we can support one another and share our lessons learned and share the victories when we're able to move the needle towards safe technology. And as Deb mentioned, somebody found my work and asked if I would co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference down at the National Institutes of Health. And I was really honored to be asked. And what I like about sharing this link, and again, when we give you my slides, anything with these blue underlines is a link for you to go verify for yourself. So don't take our word on any of this. We want you to know this for yourself so you feel comfortable making changes in your own life and then perhaps inviting others into the conversation. But these talks that we gave down at the National Institutes of Health were limited to 10 minutes each. So you'll hear, I'll do the opening remarks. We have Dr. Martin Paul, who's a world leading scientist on this. We had Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada, who when he retired did his investigation, and now he has formed Canadians for Safe Technology. And he tells us that the industry can do better. And it's encouraging to hear from a captain of industry when he's saying, we are not safe here in North America. And then we had Peter Sullivan, who founded Clearlight Ventures and does a lot of work in the autism community. He got both his children off the autism spectrum, in large part by creating a digital detox and getting the wireless radiation out of their living environment. Now, we know that every child and every person with autism is different. Some have de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom and it didn't come from dad. So it came from somewhere in the environment. But we hear back from building biologists on a regular basis. We hear from doctors who are trained in wireless radiation detection and remediation, that there are many improvements that can be had by removing the wireless exposure. So we also have Theodora Scorado on our panel, who is the so hardworking, courageous executive director of the Environmental Health Trust. And in her talk, she talks about what other countries are doing to protect their citizens. So these are good ones to share when opening the conversation, and you want to do it very credibly, 10 minutes or less on each speaker. And then we've worked very hard since 2018 to put together medical conferences so that doctors, nurses, first responders, and all healthcare practitioners can be professionally trained to recognize, diagnose, treat, and prevent electromagnetic field illnesses. And I just want to take a moment to talk about our alphabet soup. So when we talk about wireless radiation, sometimes we hear it referred to as radio frequency radiation, electromagnetic radiation, electromagnetic fields, microwave radiation. In general, it's all the same. It's this constant pulsation of microwave radiation from our own devices and from the infrastructure and the smart meters that are installed on our homes. So we'll talk about each one of those for a moment during our presentation tonight too. But I really want to encourage people to share this with their own healthcare practitioners, because far too many people are being misdiagnosed, and we now have 24.5 continuing education credits for everybody. And if you like to geek out and you really want to go to this conference, the entire world can attend. They've dropped the price down to $39 for you to license the videos to watch. And to complete the medical conference for CMEs or CEs, it's less than $100. So we're trying to do everything we can to make this accessible to as many people as possible. So why did my schools become the first in the nation to have this little sign, my little sign, hanging in our classrooms with baby steps for precaution? I think it was when they read the legal fine print that comes in all of our devices. So our friends at Environmental Health Trust have a page called See the Fine Print, where you can go through and see what some of the common fine print warnings are that most people have no idea are in there. So anybody who has an iPhone with you today, I invite you to take that out and go into settings. If you don't have an iPhone and you'd like to find them in your own device, you can probably go online and look up your model and just type in RF exposure for radio frequency radiation exposure. But here's how to get to it in an iPhone. From settings, just scroll down a bit and hit general. On a really old phone, you'd then hit about at the top, but most people have since traded in their old phones. So from general, go all the way down to legal and regulatory. And if it helps, you can remember the acronym GAL, like general, legal. This gal taught me how to find this. Once you're in legal and regulatory, about 4 down on that little menu, you'll see RF exposure, which is this radio frequency, man-made microwave radiation that they politely call energy in their fine print disclaimer. And when we take a look at that, it's telling us a couple of really important things. One, this device was tested at a distance away from the body. So if you're holding an actively transmitting device, you are exceeding the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. And as we'll discuss when we look at legal aspects of this, those were never safety tested for biological harm. And they allow like this much radiation to the public, and the science is now very conclusive that it's causing harm at hundreds of thousands of times below what the FCC and industry continue to radiate us with. So in the next paragraph or two, you'll see that they suggest that if you're concerned about this, that you use a hands-free option like speakerphone or a headset. Now, you want to be careful with what you use for a headset. If you use the regular one that might come with your phone, that's going to plug a wire into your phone, and radiation loves metal. It transfers, it cruises right along on metal. So if you're putting a regular headset into your device and running it up to your head, you're making a clear pathway for microwave radiation to your brain. Those earbuds, you definitely don't want a microwave radiation transmitter on both sides of your brain sending signal through your master organ there. There are solutions for everything. Our message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And we can walk you through a solution for everything. So for the headsets, there's something on the market called hollow tube or air tube headsets. And as we take a look at what that might look like, it looks like this. So it does have the metal wire at the bottom that you plug into your device, but then it comes up here where you have nice controls for muting and volume. And then it's got these little ferrite beads that break the radiation. And then
You could not.
oh, please mute yourself. And then it comes up to hollow tubes with no metal that go right into your ear. And I saw what I thought at first blush looked like a really cool hollow tube headset, but they didn't know any better. And they put 2 magnets on it so you could hook it around your neck when you're not using it. You don't want metal up here by your head if you've got a radiating device near you. So look for the hollow tube, look for the air tubes. There's lots of companies that sell them. Just make sure there's no metal up to your head. So when I was figuring this all out, my brain goes right to solutions, right? I spent 8 years bringing this toxic technology into our school. So how do we fix it? Well, I learned that with this invisible radiation, it's tough to get our minds around it. And then I learned there are devices that allow us to see and hear this invisible toxin. So what I did is I went after a grant in my town to put this one, the acoustimeter, on loan in our public library. And again, that wasn't an easy conversation. They rejected my application 2 times before on the 3rd go around, I got it approved. And what it took was for me to meet one-on-one with every member of our select board and teach them the risks and show them the risks. And then they said, well, I wanted 2 meters. I wanted a grant for 2 meters, one for our library, so everybody in our town could take it out and go home and measure. And then I wanted one for our schools to have on a permanent basis so they could always make sure the kids are safe. But this was so new that by the time they finally gave me, the $400 for the grant, they said, we'll just give you one, because they were still a little uncertain. conditionally that the library would agree to take this into circulation. And so I had to meet with the library trustees, and they voted 4-1 to bring this into circulation. And the reason I got the idea to even do that is when the energy industry was switching us away from the healthier incandescent light bulbs to these energy efficient ones that throw off a lot of man-made dirty electricity. They did a marketing thing where they put a kilowatt meter on loan in all of our public libraries here. And with that, they wanted the public to take that kilowatt meter home, measure how much a healthy incandescent bulb would use versus how much these swirly CFLs were putting off, and go, oh, cool, I'll save some money. But you're not really, because it's at the expense of your health. So we became the first in the nation to put one of these devices on loan. And that's something that all of you could consider working on in your library. I've heard from others around the country where they just ponied up and donated one to their library. And if you reach out, we can give you some of the paperwork that our library uses to put it out to the public. Newton, when we went to the first medical conference in 2019, I met a holistic child and adult psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Judy Safrier. And when we got home to Massachusetts, we went after a state level grant from our cultural council. And we did a training program with the award-winning Film Generations Act, and then got funding to put a meter in their library too. And then out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where Verizon put up an illegal cell tower right on top of a neighborhood, it has made children and adults so sick that they've had to abandon their homes. And the Pittsfield Library got one of these meters to put on loan in their library too. So thank you to every citizen who makes this happen. And the one on the right here is the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter. Now, both of these are great meters and they're pretty on par. This one's just newer, and so it has a little bit more capability in it. So I want to do a demonstration right now with this meter, and this is what was recommended at the medical conference. And for example, a chiropractor here has bought one, and she loans it out to her patients for $10 and says, you've got 2 hours, go home and measure, see what's going on in your home, and then come back and we'll help you figure out how to get to a safe level. Because she was saying, you know, she can teach her patients nutrition, she can take care of their spinal alignment and other treatments, but if they're constantly bombarded with microwave radiation, they're never going to get back to homeostasis or true health again. So I'm inspired by everybody who's taking action around this. So here in my home, and actually it was funny, the other day I was about to share just how low the radiation is in my home, and my husband popped in with his cell phone radiating, and it changed my reading. So I'm the only one home right now. And in my home, the maximum spike of microwave radiation that we're getting is 4.7. In the scientific literature, they want to see us under 10. So I feel really good. It took me a while of circling my tail, looking at everything in my home, like those decked cordless device, you know, cordless phones. That's like having your own cell tower. The router was like having my own cell tower. So one by one, I plucked up the courage and I swapped things out in my home. So now on this meter, it's the middle number that gives us the 4.7. That unit of measurement is called a microwatt per square meter. So basically within 3 feet of air, how much radiation is there? We want to be under 10. So now I'd like to give a demonstration of when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and I go active. So by coming out of airplane mode, that activated the cellular antenna, the Bluetooth antenna, the Wi-Fi antenna. There's also a locator and a hotspot antenna. So we want to be very judicious. I'm gonna make that stop screaming at you and go back into airplane mode. And it's dissipating out of the air. And now look, I'm back into the flashing green instead of the screaming red, right? Almost radio silence. I do get a little bit of bleed through sometimes from my neighbors. And we do have 2 utility meters for electric and solar that pulse this radiation, but they're on the far side of the house. So I'm probably not getting much of that right now. So we went from 4.7 microwatts per square meter to 400,000 microwatts per square meter just by having that active phone next to me. And I wasn't even doing anything. You can play with it yourself and see what happens when you're actually streaming or downloading or sending and receiving. It's hairy. So our goal is to teach people and to empower you to share this information with anybody who you think would want to know that we can have amazing technology and without the wireless radiation exposures. So this is how I got involved in all of this. And my local cable station has been so good. And I want to encourage you all to talk to your local cable stations. They are one of the last bastions of independent reporting available to us today, because most of mainstream media, we used to have 50 mainstream media channels, and they got bought out and bought out and bought out. And they're all now owned by very large corporate interests. So when we turn on our television or radio, you can pretty much figure out who owns those airwaves by the ads that you're hearing. All Wi-Fi all the time, 5G, pharmaceutical, the whole gamut. So use your local cable stations. They love to hear from the community. And mine came in and brought a camera and one of their resources. And we did a 23-minute public service announcement that ran on my cable station to teach people what the exposures look like in a common household today. And then one by one suggestions for how they might reduce those exposures. So yeah, I love our cable stations. So what does the science tell us? In the long term, we are seeing clear evidence of cancerous tumors. This is the U.S. National Toxicology Program study that went on for 20 years. And at the end of the day, they had an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health. And mind you, the NTP is the gold standard for toxics research in the world. And after their review of this, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors, DNA damage, and more. The industry, every time a good study comes out, will suggest that, oh, that's just one study. You can ignore it. You need to have more studies. Well, right on the heels of our amazing study that determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy published another large-scale study on cell towers that corroborated everything we found here in the US. So while science will always continue to evolve so that we know more and more, at this point in time, we don't need more science. We need public policy and educated citizens. So, DNA damage, that is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a fetus to a child, to our bees, our pollinators, our trees, the entire ecosystem. If we're damaging the DNA, well, we're seeing what's happening. It was the infertility studies that got me on my feet. They've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating. It slowed the motility of the sperm. It caused far fewer sperm to be viable, which is apoptosis or programmed cell death. And it caused DNA damage in just 4 hours of exposure to the radiation from a laptop. And my kids, my oldest had just gone up to college, and she, of course, had a MacBook by then. My youngest had just gone into high school, and for Christmas, we bought her a laptop. And where both my daughters using it, but right on top of their reproductive organs. And since that time, Kaiser Permanente and others have done additional studies showing higher rates of miscarriage for women who use wireless technology close to their fetuses. So lots of solid science, peer-reviewed, repeated studies to show that we have got a big opportunity to improve here. Neurotoxicity. So what the science is telling us is that we have something called the blood-brain barrier, and it protects our brain when the blood is escorting toxins out of the body. it's supposed to protect us. But what the science is showing is that this constant pulse of spiked erratic microwave radiation hitting us is breaking that blood-brain barrier. And so now that it's permeating, instead of just escorting the toxins out of the body, they can take a turn into our brains. And so we now have all these escalating neurotoxic effects. Dr. Hugh Taylor runs the OBGYN program at Yale Medical School, and he has done some of these rodent studies because it's unethical to experiment on humans. So thank you to all the little critters who sacrifice themselves for our benefit. But in his rodent studies, he saw that when you expose the pregnant mice, the pups come out bouncing off the walls of the cage, not a care in the world, much like a child with ADD who has these attention and deficit disorders. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge connections between what we know about microwave exposures and what she sees in the families in her care who are working with Alzheimer's or with autism. And then Dr. Martin Paul just recently came out with a new review paper, which means you gather up all the studies on a topic and you look at them together and see what we can see. And when Dr. Paul put out his Alzheimer's paper, he indicates that we are seeing earlier and earlier onset Alzheimer's as we continue to layer on this electropollution. It used to be that, like cancer, it would take like 25 years for Alzheimer's to surface. And now, instead of being in our 70s and 80s, we are also seeing it come on in people in their 60s, their 50s, their 40s, their 30s, and even in some rare cases, 20-year-olds are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So we want to give a shout out to the Environmental Working Group. Years ago, they were working on this issue, and they've recently gotten funding again, and they now have a PhD who is making this her priority. And they have put out fact sheets on the neurotoxicity, which we link to here. They also have one on the impact of children being exposed, calling for far lower public radiation exposure limits than what the FCC and the industry still allow today. And children are especially vulnerable. They're not just little adults. Their immune system is still under development. Their central nervous system is still under development. And as Dr. Om Gandhi's diagram here models for us, when an adult, so all these little head models here are tilted sideways. The yellow is the ear. When you put a cell phone up to the ear of an adult, it's actually penetrating inside your brain and mine about a third of the way through. On a 10-year-old child, it's going about 3/4 of the way into the brain and radiating it. And on a 5-year-old child, it's permeating almost the entire brain. And the reason being is that a child's skull is thinner than a fully formed adult's, and they have a higher water content in their brains than an adult does. And so that radiation really gets rocking inside there with the water. So we need to be very judicious on when and how we choose our technology. So in the short term, a lot of people start to recognize these symptoms that they never in a million years would have guessed might be connected to their exposure to their wireless gadgets. So we should know that the Americans with Disabilities Act has already recognized these electromagnetic sensitivities or illnesses. And if at this link here, you can find support materials to help you open this conversation credibly. But since 2002, they have recognized this as a risk. Now, the symptoms of microwave sickness, insomnia is a big one. And what the science has discovered is that in the wee hours of darkness, as part of our circadian rhythm, which is regulated by light, we all should be getting out in the morning and in the afternoon and the evening and getting the light into our body, because that regulates every single one of our organs. In the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland in the brain releases melatonin. Melatonin goes in and regulates our sleep, but also helps to do the daily repair and the toxic cleanup from our cells and escort that stuff out of the body. what the science shows us is our brain can't distinguish between natural daylight and man-made radiation, this light energy form that's radio frequency. So the brain thinks the lights are on and it's not releasing the melatonin to regulate our own self-care mechanisms. So insomnia is a huge one. And what I love about teaching is that time and again, after coming to one of our educational seminars, people will come back and say, gosh, you know, I'm so dependent on all my technology and I just didn't want to believe this. But when you started talking about these symptoms, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe that's what's wrong with me. So time and again, they come back and say, I turned everything off and oh my goodness, I slept for the first time in ages, right? So insomnia is a big one. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches that their doctors can't figure out. Nosebleeds, ear bleeds. My youngest she had a migraine in high school. What kid should be getting a migraine, right? And sleeping is what kids have always done best, especially teenagers. And now the kids aren't sleeping right anymore. So my daughter was getting the nosebleeds too. Once I stopped circling my tail and fixed everything at home, she started sleeping through the night. The headaches and the nosebleeds went way down, unless she let herself get dehydrated, and then she might have one. But otherwise, and chronic fatigue, so many people are suffering from that. Pain from unidentified sources as we jackhammer ourselves with this microwave radiation. Skin, a lot of people talk about the hot ear from holding a phone up to their head. Others have tingling, others have nerve damage happening, and flushing, rashes. These can all often be remediated by simply choosing safe, hardwired technology. That just means grabbing your Ethernet cables and plugging them back into the back of your router and getting little adapters to go to the Ethernet cable and then just turning off the antennas and everything. And we'll give you a good slide for that in a minute. So heartbeats that are too fast or too slow, depending on what your own individual bio makeup is. Cognitive impairment's a big one where people can't remember what it was that they were doing, their short-term memory, their long-term memory. We know scientifically this is a neurotoxin, and Dr. Paul has another good paper over here that you'll find up here on this page as well. Anger and behavior issues. It was really disturbing at the EMF medical conference to hear these world-leading experts say that we can expect to see many more of these societal outbursts because what we're doing with this electrosmog is biologically changing the gray matter and the white matter of our brain, which then trickles down to our behavior. So recently in Boston, we had news stories in 3 different Boston schools where the children who had been issued Chromebooks were literally beating on their classmates with them. So how long can we continue to radiate our kids and not expect to see these neurotoxicity fallouts? Anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. We were at epidemic proportions of anxiety and depression before the pandemic as we continue to radiate our populace. So it's not just you and I and our children, it's every biosystem on the planet. And there's some great resources here. I won't go into it in too much depth because we want to be respectful of your time. But these waves of microwave radiation are taking down our pollinators, our birds. They're dysregulating their own navigation system so they can't find their way back to the hive or their nests or out to drop their seeds where they need to drop their seeds for us. This radio frequency and all of the infrastructure that goes with it consumes 10 times more energy than the responsible solution, which is to bring hardwired technology right to the building and then just pick up with as many Ethernet cables as you need to have safe and responsible technology. There was a Greenpeace analyst as far back as 2012 who said that if the cloud were a country, it would be the fifth largest consumer in the world. That was 10 years ago. And look at all this new wireless that we've introduced since then. So lots of ways that we can improve. And just know that we all make individual choices unwittingly, but now we can really choose. Download everything and then turn off the antennas. The wireless industry is now buying up the entertainment industry and pushing streaming, all Wi-Fi, all the time, faster speeds, faster downloads. Every time we send and receive, that's consuming energy, and we charge and we recharge and we recharge our wireless devices. Once you hardwire it, you don't need to be charging it like that. And then in the background, we've been sweet talked into all these applications that honestly, we probably don't even use. Get rid of all of those because they're in the background doing updates all the time and consuming energy. So as I fell down the rabbit hole with this in 2013, I kept scratching my head going, why don't we know about this? And surely somebody's got to be having our backs on this if this is as bad as my own private investigation has revealed. So I was so grateful in 2015 when Harvard Law School Center for Ethics put out this free online report called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it presumably regulates. So this graphic says it all. It's a revolving door between the wireless industry and our federal agencies. Most of our FCC commissioners have come from industry. So that was my missing piece of the puzzle when I went, oh, bugger, nobody's got our backs on this. So that's where I started plucking up the courage to start these fact-based conversations in my community and with my loved ones. And it has never, ever been an easy conversation. But I had to quickly learn that if I stay calm and professional and fact-based, then we can make inroads. So remember I mentioned that $30 million study that our National Toxicology Program did. That was commissioned by our Food and Drug Administration a couple of decades ago. Well, today, the gentleman who's in charge of radiation at the FDA is Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. And when the NTP study confirmed clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage, that was supposed to trigger public policy to protect you and I and our planet. Instead, Dr. Shuren went over to the FCC and said, nothing to look at here, keep doing what you're doing. So the FCC said, the FDA said it's fine, so we're just going to keep with the public radiation limits we've always had. Once that determination hit the Federal Register, then the lawsuits began, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But one might ask, what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that? Turns out when you do just a little bit more research, he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents big Wi-Fi and a lot of the other bigs like chemical, etc. So we have conflicts of interest riddled throughout our federal agencies. So we think this is going to have to be taken care of, not only at the federal level, but we need to empower our state and local agencies to push up to the federal level as well. When we open this conversation, a lot of people will hop right on their tablets or their phones and go look and see what the World Health Organization says. And why wouldn't you, right? But unfortunately, there are two groups at the World Health Organization that deal with electromagnetic radiation. One is very heavily industry funded and influenced. The other is the real scientists who are trying to bring forth the truth. And so if you do a quick search, what comes up are old stuff, false assurances that there's no consensus that there's any harm here. So keep doing what you're doing. But once you know really where to look, you will see that after the NTP and the Ramazzini studies came out, confirming through the rodent studies that this is something to be looking at. So in 2011, the World Health Organization classified this alongside lead, thalidomide, DDT, and a host of other really bad toxins in group 2B, possible human carcinogen. Now that we have the rodent studies done, we know this is a group 1 human carcinogen, but the WHO needs to catch up to that in public policy. So you have to look for it, but we can give you this link here. They have actually reopened their investigation in 2020. And over the next few years, they're going to be looking at this with impacts on cancer, on reproductive, on children, on the environment. So they are working on it, but it remains to be seen. Who's going to do this investigation? Will it be the captured agency at the WHO, or will they have fully well-credentialed scientists and doctors on that? So just know when people say, oh, the WHO says there's no problem, come back to here and share this. So that's all the bad news, right? But now let's focus on solutions. Here's what safe technology looks like. When you look at the back of your router, you'll see there are Ethernet ports. All you need to do is get a big long Ethernet cable and run it to where you use your technology. Most of us have more than one device these days, so you can buy an Ethernet switch. This is one that I purchased, and I think of it as like an extension cord for electronics. You can get these in many, many lengths. Like for a classroom, you could have 28 or 30 jacks in here to hardwire all the devices. And then you just get your shorter cables and adapters. Who knew? You know, like I indicated, there are little adapters that cost maybe $20 or $30 that you can use to plug in a phone that allows you to do any of your internet stuff. If you need to make a phone call or receive a phone call, you can forward that right to your landline, right? Forward your calls to your landline, and then you can use a safe hardwired phone when you're not on the go. And same thing for the tablets and the laptops. You can get a little adapter, right? Not rocket science. On the iProducts, this is the Lightning adapter on the for the phone, and then the Thunderbolt adapter for the MacBook. But there are companies out there like Pluggable, where you can just go out and see if there's a compatible adapter for your device. So the first step is just get the wiring that you need. The second step is to turn off the antennas in everything. You can contact your internet service provider. I did. Verizon told me how to get into they just said, sit down at your computer. We'll walk you through how to get into your online account. And from my computer, because it's hooked up to that router, I could just go in and do wireless settings. We had multiple antennas in there, and to the 2.4 gigahertz, I just turned it off. To the 5 gigahertz antenna, I just turned it off. We had Comcast for a while. They also had a 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz hotspot, which just kind of blew my mind because they're putting a public hotspot on my router using my electricity so that people driving by can grab signal. That should never be legal to do, first of all. And then we discovered another sneaky antenna in the Comcast Xfinity box. And it took me a conversation with a friend in Silicon Valley to figure out that they had put a home security antenna, a wireless home security antenna in that box. Whether we're using it or not, it was sitting there pulsing microwave radiation 24/7. So I was advised that you need to get to a tier 2 tech support person to turn off one. If you think you've got everything off and then you measure and something's still radiating, you might need a tier 2 tech support person to turn it off. And that usually gets you an engineer who can go deeper into the system and turn it off from their end. So step 2 is turning off the antennas. And step 3 is you always have to measure, because with the Internet of Things, they want to put an antenna in just about every device, every electronic that you buy, so they can harvest your data and sell that as a revenue stream. So having a meter is really important. If that's difficult financially, I know people who have gone together with their neighbors and they all divvy up the cost. And then I also know others who have donated them into their community library system so everybody can access it. So where does the radiation come from? We've talked about our personal devices, and I just want to give you a heads up about the utility meters for gas, water, electric, solar, propane. A lot of those now have radio frequency transmitters in them. And you can tell because any transmitting device will have an FCC identification number on it. So look for that and then see what you can do. There's many dangers with these. They pulse this radiation continuously. That radiation can hop on the wires and pipes of your house because it loves metal. And there are far too many cases of fires and explosions because these things were installed improperly. And again, the industry wants your data. There are many privacy issues around there. But at the medical conference, they said that often when these smart meters go in, and for people who live in a multi-unit dwelling like a condo or an apartment complex, you might wind up with a bank of these transmitting nearby. So they said that when these smart meters go on, they're getting a heavy patient load with people who started experiencing sudden onset microwave sickness. So it's an environmental justice issue again. They will go into underprivileged communities where people don't have time to be seeing what's going on if they're working 3 jobs to try and get food on the table and shelter over their family. So industry, as they're prone to do with many of these toxic industries, they'll come into a poor, underprivileged community, roll out the toxic technology, and then say, hey, look, it worked great here. Now we're going to roll it out everywhere. So that happened here in Worcester, Massachusetts with the smart grid. Jeremy Johnson is a Silicon Valley engineer. His wife was a medical doctor, and they both got really sick when a smart meter bank went in on their condo, and he gives a wonderful TED Talk here. So that's a nice, credible resource to share with others. The other, one of the other exposures that we may not have direct control over are the macro cell antennas or the cell towers. Those are the really big ones. You can look at the non-industry funded science on this. This is my personal research repository called Understanding EMFs, but you can go to this link. No bells or whistles. I just do straight bullets and get you right to the source of information so you can share that out with others. So in the scientific literature, they're saying that you need to be at least 500 meters away from these cell antennas. Double that is where it really catches up to the general population for death, for neurotoxicity, insomnia, etc. But we start to see it come down at this 500 meter or 1,640 foot mark. So look at the non-industry funded science, because our towns have been given a lot of disinformation by the wireless industry when they put in applications to bring this infrastructure in. There's a website called antennasearch.com where you can plug in any address in the US, and it will give you back a return of a 3-mile radius and show you how many antennas like this and how many cell towers are within that 3-mile radius. When I did this for our state house here in Boston, at the time I pulled up this little report, there were so many thousands of antennas that it could only return a 1-mile radius. Within 1 mile of our state house, there were 1,184 of these big antennas within 1 mile of our state house. So Boston is a really toxic city, and they've densified in most of our major cities like this. So antennasearch.com, this was another environmental justice community in Hyde Park. And you can see they have just poured this toxic technology in to these communities, and they go after the wealthier communities too, because those are the people who can buy the new gadgets. So now we layer on the small cells. This is an additional map of Boston. Every one of these dots is one of the color-coded carriers over here that had put in toxic small cells at the curb at bedroom and office height and school height. This is what some of the cheaper ones look like. Sometimes they will come in and bring in a fancy one that looks like a wrought iron light post, but it's actually a cell tower right at the curb. So 5G is simply 5th generation technology. Okay, so that follows 3G and 4G. Well, 3G and 4G use these longer wavelengths that could penetrate into buildings. All that's left to monetize are these small millimeter waves. And the industry is spinning it up that these dinky little millimeter waves are going to bring us faster downloads for entertainment. Remember, they're buying up the entertainment industry. We'll have smart cities and super highways, etc. So 3G and 4G aren't going away. They're repurposing them in some ways to bundle it with these little millimeter waves, and they're putting it all right at the curb at close range outside of our living spaces, right on top of our schools. And they are doing a disservice to the environment yet again, they're clear cutting trees or just lopping them off or removing them altogether so their signals can get through. And that should never be allowed in our communities. So their goal is to put millions of these small cells at the curb, right outside our bedrooms, every 2 to 12 houses. That's what 5G is. So US Senator Richard Blumenthal was at a Commerce Committee meeting down in DC, and he said to two of the industry gentlemen, please share with us how much money has been spent on independent, non-industry funded science to prove that this was safe before coming to market. And both of the industry guys had to confide that indeed they know of no safety testing that was ever done on this. So Senator Blumenthal says, so as far as health and safety are concerned, we're basically flying blind here. And we are. But we do have more science now showing it's extraordinarily harmful. Even outlets like Computer World and others are saying 5G is a bad joke. We're not even getting the faster speeds that they're promising. We were perfectly fine with the speeds we were getting with 4G, even though they were toxic. You know, that's another issue. But speed-wise, it's not doing what they said it was going to do. And here in January, Verizon announced they are bringing 5G to 100 million people. So we're seeing it happen all over the nation. And in the heat of the pandemic, Dr. Rob Brown and Dr. Beverly Rubik put out a paper showing evidence for a connection between COVID-19 and exposure from radio frequency radiation, including 5G. And what they were able to do was pull the data from the cities that had adopted 5G and rolled it out and compare it to others where it hadn't been rolled out yet. And they found a much higher COVID case rate and the mortality rate. And I had one of our, my state representative said to me, you know, Cece, when you started talking about COVID, that's when I stopped listening. And so what I did is I provided him with the scientific evidence, because we're not suggesting that this is the direct cause of COVID. But once we understand the science, we know that our biological cells only have so much energy to do what our bodies need to do. And so then when you add on an environmental toxin first with radio frequency that's pulsing 24/7, unless we get control of it and shut it off, and then you add a virus on top of that, we were already down a cord, right? And now we're adding another body burden with the virus. And so it's no wonder that where we've got all this electro pollution that the body can't keep up with cell repair and regeneration. So yeah, when you add a virus on top of heavy wireless pollution, we can expect to see higher rates of mortality and illness cases. So please share that out if somebody says, oh, you know, anti-vaxxer, blah, 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 you know, and tries to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Bring them the facts, because we know that this is a factor. So the meter that I mentioned that was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference is the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter by Safe Living Technologies. Rob Metzinger owns that company and developed this meter. He is one of our building biologists and understands this issue top to bottom. He has very graciously extended a discount to Dr. Magda Havas, who has started the Global EMF Monitoring Project. Dr. Havas recognizes that throughout the world, our governments have dropped the ball and in most cases are not monitoring all of this cumulative electrosmog in our communities. So she has started her project. Rob has offered a discount. So she's asking for people to sign up to be citizen scientists and go out into your community. And she's got this great protocol, a little sheet of paper that you fill out according to her directions. And then we take the data from our communities and we put it into her database so that she can build out this map of where we can brag about our communities in the green and where we're in deep trouble, the blackout, the red, the amber, and the green. She calls this her BRAG project, B-R-A-G. And so in the scientific literature, they want us to be outdoors under 1,000 microwatts per square meter. Indoors, we want to be under 10. Outdoors, presuming you're not standing under that and you're moving about, and you have a clean environment to clear up your toxicity at night, we might do okay if we could get to 1,000 outdoors. So if you contact globalemf.net and let them know you'd like to participate as a citizen scientist, and we want thousands of people to do this, then you can receive a discount code. That meter retails for $385, I think. And I think with my discount a year or two ago, I got it for like $308. So that's a significant chunk of change. So what are some of our communities looking like? The goal is less than 1,000. In New Hampshire at the fire department, it was only at 417. That's pretty good because they wouldn't allow a cell tower on the fire department. Keene, New Hampshire, getting into the amber zone, 7,000. Nashua, New Hampshire, into the red zone at 5,000 or 14,500. Concord, New Hampshire, Deb and I went and measured at their capital during the pandemic, so there weren't many cars and there weren't many people. Today, if we measured, we would probably get much higher readings when an active society is out and about. But even then, it was in the red zone at 66,000. And in Stratham, New Hampshire, where Deb lives, and Representative Patrick Abrami, who introduced legislation there, they were in the blackout zone at 108,000 because they had a massive cell tower right there in their main drag. Here in the North End, Boston, look at this. 613,000 down Hanover Street, which is a highly trafficked tourist area where all of our wonderful Italian restaurants and bakeries are. But a lot of people live right above the restaurants. And look what they did. They talked their neighborhood association into accepting these pretty wrought iron street lights that are actually cell towers right at street level. When you go down Hanover Street and you look down the side streets, you've got these ugly gray monopoles that they put up at bedroom height. So they're sneaky. They're always going to go for the path of least resistance and highest profitability. So we need to be on our toes with what's happening in our towns. So let's talk about good news in 3 areas that Dr. Martin Luther King taught us. Whenever we have meaningful change in our society, it comes through public engagement, the court rulings, and public policy. And we've got some great news to share in all of these areas. Legal solutions. I mentioned when the FCC reaffirmed their toxic levels and filed it in something called the Federal Register. Once that happened, then the lawsuits could open up. A bunch were filed with Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and others, and they were all combined into one lawsuit that went in under Environmental Health Trust versus the FCC in the United States. They won that lawsuit. They were presented with the judges were presented with 11,000 pages of scientific evidence of harm, showing that the FCC or the FDA never did their homework on this. And so it's been sent back to the FCC to relook at their public radiation exposure limits as far as children, the environment, and so on, cancers or infertility. So there are lawsuits happening. The regulators are a group of people who used to work for industry, and then they noticed the shell game that was going on. Long ago, we paid to bring the right solution, which is fiber optics or cable or high-speed copper, right to the building, where you just pick up with cabling inside, Ethernet cables. We already paid for that with our taxes on our internet service provider bills. So the regulators went after the FCC and they opened up a pathway that our states can go back and start recouping that funding so that we can bring proper technology to and through the premises. Right now, there is a very exciting case that started back in 2001, where the first group started identifying that they got brain tumors from their cell phones. And then as the years progressed, more people joined those lawsuits. And so now, right now in the month of September, it has escalated far enough, and at every juncture, the industry tries to delay. But now it's before a judge, and this judge is going to assess whether there's enough evidence right now to take this to trial. So the wheels are coming off the bus for the wireless industry, and we're hopeful that this judge is not captured by industry. So these are all very exciting, positive steps in the right direction. The Americans for Responsible Technology group run by Patty and Doug Wood recognized that this could drag out for a long time. And right now we need protections and information. So they have filed for eminent hazard with the FDA. They put in a petition because they know that in other areas, eminent hazard has been used to take meaningful action. So we hope everyone will support their petition there. We have some really important things happening in Massachusetts right now. The Pittsfield Board of Health is the first in the nation to actually stop and look at this issue. They investigated for 18 months, and then they wrote an emergency order to Verizon saying, come to the table and tell us why we should not issue a cease and desist order for this cell tower that has made families so sick they've had to abandon their homes and seek subpar living arrangements elsewhere. So that's a first in the nation. It's really well documented. And they call out the experts that the industry brought in, and they went through and said, well, wait a minute, this Dr. Eric Swanson is not an expert in this area. He's a physicist who focuses on theoretical physics. He has never published one single paper on wireless radiation effects. So the industry brings in these shills as if they are the end all be all to this, and they aren't even credentialed to be talking about this issue. So that's documented in the Pittsfield Emergency Cease and Desist Order. And then the Massachusetts Board of Health, the state level organization for Massachusetts Boards of Health, has updated their legal guidelines for our boards of health. And they have 4 pages at the back of this now that address cell towers and why our towns really need to be stepping up and learning about this and protecting our citizens. So good legal things happening. The Face School in Massachusetts had children getting sick from the industrial strength Wi-Fi, and the first time in US courts, they legally acknowledge there are indeed serious biological effects at the non-thermal level. So lots of lawsuits happening all over. Please go and take a look at these. And then for public policy, we are so grateful to Deb and to Lori and to Jen and the many others in New Hampshire that are banding together to work towards safe technology. Deb introduced this issue to her state representative, Patrick Abrami. He was an engineer, and all our engineers and physicists and technologists have been taught by industry is that you have to have heat from a device to cause harm. Well, we now know that's not true. So Rep. Abrami wrote a bill back in 2019 that asks, why do Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and others already recognize this as a world-leading risk and have put exclusions in? So that leaves our towns very vulnerable to legal liability for damages. Why does that legal fine print that we reviewed earlier today say to keep this away from the body? Why is the FCC ignoring all the science? And why do they allow 100 times more public radiation exposure than other countries do? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect, not just from one device, but everything that we are blanketed in today? So we got this bill passed into a law through the House, through the Senate, under Governor Sununu's pen in less than 7 months. And here in Massachusetts, we've had bills for 10 years trying to address this. I think we're very deep in bed with industry in Massachusetts. New Hampshire is the live free or die state. We're already seeing pressure from industry up in New Hampshire as this progresses, but New Hampshire is not backing down, and we are so very grateful. Lots of resources for you. This session in 2022, New Hampshire introduced a new bill. So let me back up just a second here. They came out with this groundbreaking commission report back in 2020. They spent an entire year, even during the pandemic, investigating with world-leading scientists, doctors, public health experts, and others. They came out with this groundbreaking commission report that documents the conflicts of interest with industry and our federal agencies, and they make 15 recommendations for how to start transitioning to responsible and even better, faster technology, because wireless is really poor quality. And with a cable, you can have exceptionally fast speeds that are far more reliable and that consume far less electricity. So this year they introduced House Bill 1644, and I want to give a shout out to Rep. Abrami for his leadership on this, Senator Denise Ricciardi, and Representative Dr. Gary Woods for their co-sponsorship of this bill. It's a bipartisan bill. You can only eat the elephant one bite at a time, so they're starting with the setbacks according to the science. And Dr. Kent Chamberlain from the University of New Hampshire Department of Computer and Electrical Engineering, he served on this commission, and he has now had a complete 180 and now sees the harm from electromagnetic fields. He worked on EMFs as an engineer for 30 years, but he was never given information on the biological effects. So, you know, there are some really good people working on this, and we're so grateful for Dr. Chamberlain. He has done a 20-minute presentation that anybody can access, and he makes his slides available again so people can dive into the science. They also put a registry of harm paid for by industry in this bill because people are getting sick and they have no way to report it. So that's important too. I wanted to point out that Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada, sent in testimony, and you can read his full testimony here. But he clarifies that wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. It has outlived its useful life as a main source of connectivity. We need fiber to and through the premises, and this is a nice piece of literature to take with you when you open these conversations. These were 3-minute testimonies that we gave, so it's not even a very long document, but it's highly credible. So anybody is welcome to go out and look and listen to these hearings. All of our talks that we're giving to educate the public in New Hampshire, those are all listed out here as well. And we plucked up the courage and we had our first rally yesterday at the State House. And we are so very grateful to those who came and joined us and stood in solidarity to support these courageous legislators in not backing down from industry, because we know that's going on behind the scenes. So thank you to the legislators in New Hampshire who yesterday in their interim study committee voted 5-1 that they want to see us continue with meaningful action to inform the public and to empower our towns to put zoning in that will protect them from close range microwave exposures. So lots are taking action all over the country. The industry comes in and tells our towns, oh, it's just your town. These are the NIMBYs, they're not in my backyard, people, but that's simply not true. When we go to our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology at this link, there are more than 150 groups all over the country already taking very meaningful action all around the US. So here's a bunch that's going on in Massachusetts. And then a lot of the towns are doing activity as well. Boston has filed with the FCC saying, we believe the public, we don't think this is safe. Boston banded with other towns to sue the FCC. They lost, but every lawsuit, whether you win or you lose, that kicks it up a notch toward a closer stretch to safe technology. Here in Burlington, Massachusetts, we became the first to have a small cell policy that had Verizon withdrawing their 7 small cell applications. And that's because they said it has to be ADA compliant. You can't block, the passageways on the sidewalk with any equipment. It has to blend in with the environment. And if we allow these permits, you have to come back every single year and go through a recertification process to verify that this is still viable in our community. And we don't have the resources for that verification process. So you, Verizon, and all the other vendors have to pay us to have a real expert on retainer, and every year come back and recertify every single one of those small cells is still viable. Verizon didn't want to set a precedent for an annual recert or to have to pay for every single one, because remember, they want to put millions of these in across the country. So there's much that our towns can do, even though the industry is telling us in our towns, it's the law, we get to do this and there's nothing you can say or do. Simply not true. At Americans for Responsible Technology, they are culling best practices, and they have a sample ordinance that you today can take to your town and your town attorney and encourage them to do what towns like Bedford, Mass, Lincoln, Mass, Andover, Mass, Burlington, Mass are all doing. Others are doing information sessions, getting everyone on board with this, and I can be brought in to help educate if you're interested. So this is going on all over the world. So feel free to take a look at these bans that have been put in place. And then in our schools, New York Times did a series of articles showing what Silicon Valley execs are doing. They're sending their kids to schools with no technology, not hardwired, not wireless. They know that a child's brain develops properly through meaningful interaction with trusted adults, with their peers, and with their environment, not from the shallows of a screen. We can still have a component of technology in the curriculum, but we need to do it wisely and judiciously and for only as much as we actually need. So they even are having their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children while they push this whole 21st century classroom into your children's schools and mine. But with big gratitude to Patty and Doug Wood, they have also put up the Tech Safe Schools national program where they have ready to go information. They will mail it directly to your schools, explaining 3 areas: the health risks, the very serious legal liability that our schools have, and most importantly, remediation. How do we help our schools fix this? So please go into the Tech Safe Schools website. This is their logo. And we also have, again, we're bringing online coursework that can train an entire school and staff. All our staff needs professional training. They have to do it to stay certified. And we can offer this professional development, and the mature adolescents can also be trained online with this. The Environmental Health Trust has a whole slew of printables, flyers, postcards, and checklists that you can use at your disposal and share with others. Maryland became the first public health agency to recommend hardwiring our schools. The U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools is a green school certification organization. Dr. Tony Stein worked with them. They have a low EMF best practices module for new school construction and renovation. Cyprus has a great set of recommendations from the Mediterranean for how to study at home safely. Choose hardwired solutions. If you can't do that for some reason, at least create maximum distance, take breaks from the screen, and they have age by age limits. Kids should not be in front of these screens for more than a few minutes or a couple hours as the kids get older. So great resources for schools. And then for the professions, we have the medical conference. Dr. Cindy Russell has Physicians for Safe Technology, where you can refer healthcare practitioners to mine the science and the data and what's happening in public policy. For our engineers, physicists, and technologists and architects, after we went to that Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institutes of Health, Frank Kled and doctors and scientists that have served the World Health Organization and building biologists came up with this incredible paper that you can give to the professionals in your community so that they can see how can we truly get to smart and healthy buildings. Again, here's Jeremy Johnson's work, and I have a page for engineers and physicists on my website. So at home and work, again, we can train you if you're not a do-it-yourselfer. We're so grateful for this entire profession called building biology, where you can hire a consultant to teach you what you need to know, to bring them in to do an assessment. They'll give you a report of what your exposures are. They do oftentimes not just the EMFs, but the radio frequency, the dirty electricity, the bad magnetic fields, all of that. Plus, many of them are certified to do the other indoor exposures like mold, VOCs, formaldehyde, and all of that. So we love our building biologists. And then there's this award-winning film, Generation Zapped, which is a great one to show in your living room with your loved ones, with other parents, grandparents, guardians, or do a community screening at your senior center, at your library, And this is a great way to build that grassroots groundswell, because you do not want to go this alone. That was one of my hard lessons learned. I put all the puzzle pieces together and thought we would just take care of it. But because I was just one voice, I was easy enough to ignore. Where although we have this sign hanging in our schools, they're still not protecting the kids and the radiation is still transmitting. This is to cover their legal backside. So get everybody around you educated. And then as a group, go open this conversation in a polite, professional way. Be the person that you would want to address a big issue like this with. And as a group, you have much more power. So lots of resources. Bert Wolf on PBS does a travel show. Camilla Reese and Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe and others worked with him. And they have 2 28-minute episodes right out on PBS. So when we can show this is coming mainstream, that helps others to say, well, gee, maybe there is something here to look at. And again, our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology, Doug and Patty Wood, they have a whole toolkit with everything you need, from the science to signs for your yard, to letters to give to your neighbors, to letters to give to your towns, to zoning ordinance samples that you can take right to your town. So they've got a whole checklist and everything that you need right at Americans for Responsible Technology. They also have a link to the page to join a group. And if you don't have a group near you, they give you instructions for how to start a group. So grassroots is where this empowerment lands. And then for our physical and mental health, we want to avoid excessive screen time, but that means we have to be the role models for ourselves and our spouses and our kids and model that good behavior. I love this little poster that reminds us to do the things we always used to do. Play an instrument, create art, journal, write, go outside, play out in the field, go out in the forest, get a team of kids together to go play. But all these wonderful things, go take care of your elderly neighbor, do an act of kindness, go dance, go write poetry, whatever it is that makes you happy, but get back outside, get in nature. And you can have a link to this little poster too, if you want it. Dr. Laura Conover wrote a book called The Earth Prescription right as the pandemic was hitting. And I had read Clint Ober's book on grounding and earthing, which means every biological thing is meant to be connected to the earth, because we get electrons that help to regulate our own electrical systems. And now that we live off the ground, we wear rubber-soled shoes that don't allow those transmissions to come up from the earth. And we drive in rubber sneakered cars. So we very rarely, unless we mindfully connect to the earth, we're losing a huge opportunity for healing energy that's free. So when I read the first book on grounding, I thought, well, that's all really, really, really important to know. But I live in the Northeast and I can't be barefoot for half the year. So Dr. Conover came out with this Earth Prescription book, and I love the way she set it up by the 4 seasons, and she offers dozens of ways to naturally ground without having to take your shoes off. So who knows, if your pet is on the grass and you're rubbing the less furry areas, then you are instantly grounded through your pet. Or if you wear fingerless gloves in the winter and you're touching the flora and the fauna out there, you are instantly grounding through their grounded connection. So lots of great ways to get that free healing energy. And again, at the municipal level, we have resources at our fingertips. This book, Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks, is an excellent free online resource that you can print out and take right to your town. But we always have to be careful to differentiate from the industry's priority, which is to take the path of least resistance where there's already electricity run. So they want to put it right on top of us because it's cheap for them to put it in like that. So use Reinventing Wires, but we always have to measure, not for FCC limits because they were never protected, but for biological effects. And our goal should be to get to as low as reasonably achievable. That's the ALARA principle, which the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or Protection, they already have the ALARA principle for ionizing radiation, which is why we wear a lead apron when we get an X-ray, and which is why we don't leave ourselves out in the sun for 24 hours a day. They're applying that to ionizing radiation, and now we need application for non-ionizing, non-thermal, low-level microwave radiation. So let's march to this and get to as low as reasonably achievable. So what are our next steps? We need to understand there is no safe level of radio frequency man-made microwave radiation in the scientific literature. So as Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who recently retired as our nation's top scientist with the National Institutes of Environmental Health Science, she said, we need state and local efforts to help bubble this up to the federal level. She said there are definitely some really good people at the federal level, but there are definitely captured agencies. So let's see what we can do to get the legislation enacted. Let's, keep bringing people to these education sessions. We are committed to doing them twice a month, not because we want to give up 2 hours of our day or night, but because we want you to have the resources to do your own investigation. And if it clears muster with you, then bring people back to broaden the conversation. So, we did fact sheets with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health back in 2016. I was told they would be out in 3 months. It's now been 6 years and they've never issued them. So we have a good sample though that we could share with your communities. And again, let's just get everybody trained. So what you can do at the local level is start having education opportunities, get your town to form statewide tech safety committees now that technology is here to stay. Make sure they understand the importance of not mandating toxic smart meters on our homes as a first step, and then working with industry to hardwire all of the utility meters and remove the radio frequency. So hardwire our public spaces and get our bylaws in shape and tell our towns, most attorneys for our towns are not experts in microwave radiation. So let's get the attorneys in who are. Andrew Campanelli is one. He used to work for the industry, so he knows both sides of this until he recognized the harm and switched teams. He can be brought in. I think his fee to look at a town zoning code is $8,500. He'll take it from top to bottom and specifically address what's on the books in your town and what you can do to strengthen your zoning code to offer protections legally within the laws that are in place right now. Americans for Responsible Technology has a great checklist to start with. And then again, towns are already holding regional forums, and here's some examples. And again, we can be brought in to help and start where you are. What do you do for work? What professional organizations do you belong to or do you know of? And how can we open that conversation? I can be brought in to give presentations. And there's a lot that we can do once we pluck up the courage and realize just how dire this is. And if we don't say anything, there's no cavalry coming. Nobody's coming to your rescue. It comes down to you and I learning, educating others around us, and then moving the needle the entire way. It's hard work, but when you do it together with others, it's so nice to share. So for today, here's how you can hardwire. Reduce your exposures. Just start noticing what's radiating around you, and then start with baby steps. We know this is like drinking water out of a fire hose. So go scream into a pillow. That's what I used to tell my kids when they were younger. If something's got you bothered, get it out of your system. Go scream into a pillow and then come back. And one by one, what are the solutions? So start with baby steps. Create a sleep sanctuary above all else, because if you're not getting good sleep, your body doesn't stand a chance of doing cell repair and regeneration. And then start replacing all of your wireless with Ethernet cables and adapters and turning off the antennas. And as often as you can, keep your device in airplane mode. Everything that's on your device, all the clocks, the cameras, the alarms, any entertainment, books, music that you put on there is yours to enjoy without radiating yourself. So choose airplane mode as often as you can. And again, Environmental Health Trust has all sorts of checklists, printable fact sheets, postcards. So we're doing this for you. So don't hesitate to jump in and take advantage. And so thank you. And for New Hampshire for Safe Technology, you can reach them through their Facebook page, which looks like this. You can reach them by New Hampshire for Safe Technology at gmail.com. If you want to reach out to me, this is my website at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And it's MA4 safetech.org, or you can email me right at this Gmail address for now. I might change that soon because Gmail is not all that trustworthy. So I'm going to stop sharing. I know, again, it was a lot of information to take on, but we're so grateful that you were with us today. And if there are any questions, or if you have experiences from where you are that you would like to share with others, we would like to open that up. Deb, do you
Yes.
feel like moderating that for us?
Sure. I know there was one question from Dr. Yusuf Salibi. If you would like to address Cece with your question. I'm not sure if it was answered during the presentation.
And what was that?
The question was about, let me get back there.
Oh, here we go. You want me to read it, Deb?
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Salibi. He says, I have witnessed a large uptick in EMF sensitive patients in my practice since the pandemic. Are there any other clinicians who you know that are reporting the same? Definitely, yes. Wondering if the SARS-CoV-S spike protein has something to do with this. We are seeing additional sensitivities of COVID infected or vaccinated with chronic Lyme disease, mycotoxin illnesses, and others. Yeah, I think everybody is seeing an uptick since COVID. And on that one slide, you can look at Dr. Rubik and Dr. Brown's paper that talks about why that may be, whether it is directly related to what may be inside the serum that's used in the vaccinations. I don't know the answer to that, but I would encourage you to go over to Children's Health Defense, because they do a lot of reporting on the VAERS database and what's not being reported out to the public. So there are a lot of people dying from the vaccines, and a lot of people getting very ill from the vaccines that mainstream media and our federal agencies have not been reporting. There are lawsuits now taking place against them for not informing the public of alternative ways to address the pandemic. So Children's Health Defense, I want to give a shout out to. They have now taken on EMFs as a major strategic platform, and they are building resources around that. They have a complete module on Children's Health Defense. So if you go out to childrenshealthdefense.org, you will be able to find resources there. And Dr. Salibi, you will find medical doctors that have gone on to their programs, and they are sharing what they're finding in their practices. So they do a Friday roundtable with medical and scientific experts. And I know that they are looking to speak with others. So if you want to reach out directly to Children's Health Defense, they would like to speak with you as well to see if you'd like to come on and report what you're finding in your medical practice. So excellent question. Thank you so much. And it was an honor to do an EMF forum with you and others that was put together a year or two ago. So it's wonderful to have you back with us today. Okay.
That was the only question that I had seen, because we had asked people to hold them till the end. So I'm not sure if anyone has a question now that they would like to unmute and ask.
Okay. Allison McDonough, if you are still with us, I know you have become electromagnetically ill and you've been making some terrific inroads, not easy conversations by any stretch, but you are making some progress with your housing authority. And I want to give you a shout out because I know how hard it is for you to be on technology some days when the symptoms are especially bad, but you have made it a priority to testify with us in Massachusetts. And we have a clip of that out on my YouTube page. But you too, thank you, Allison. You are one of my heroes for not backing down, trying to educate others and trying to create safe spaces for people to live. So Allison, I will go ahead and spotlight you if you want to take a minute and tell us.
Yeah, I'll just
what you're up
introduce
to.
myself. I'm pretty messed up, and I have been messed up in Harvard Square since the first deployment went out in the 90s. And every new deployment has brought a new wave of crippling symptoms, and it's been very isolating also, that I didn't connect with Cece until the end of 2018. So things have started to make sense, but it's been very slow going. And I actually would like to bring up one of the more interesting things to cross my desk since the beginning of this whole debacle.
Mhm.
And it is the work of a woman, Arun. Her name is Elaine Arun, and she has published a book called The Highly Sensitive Person. And she's been doing this since like late 20th century. Her book has been translated into over 20 languages. And what she has found is neural substrates for high sensitivity have been detected with functional magnetic resonance imaging. And they have found in over 100 species that 1 out of 5 people, or 20% of all people and species, are deprocess information. And when I worked with the neurologist at my local hospital, she determined that there was nothing wrong, that my peripheral nervous system was normal. And yet, since the deployment of 5G, I have been unable to walk or talk normally. And then soon after that diagnosis, I went up to Vermont to a relatively Wi-Fi free area, and with 2 nights sleep, I experienced full remission of my 5G symptoms. And what the neurologist speculated or suggested was that something was blocking, keeping my brain from communicating with my body. And what Arun's research suggests is that we are a real minority that are being heard in a specific way, which is not to say that people who experience information coming in from their environment are not being heard, because there's, there are lots of ways being hurt by this technology. There's myocardiac arrest, heart attacks, and cancer, and it's not clear what the link with the vaccines are. But what I would be interested to hear from other people is Arun has a test on her website, which is hsperson. I'm not sure if
I'll find it.
okay, but there's a test, so you can see if you're one of the 5 people who have that sensitivity. And also the interesting thing about her work and her interviews with people is that she found that there's a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum is the highly sensitive people who do this deep processing, and that exhausts us and overwhelms us. And so that seems to map to Daniel Kahneman's thesis of thinking fast and slow. And it turns out that the slow thinkers, to think slowly, actually, you just have to take anything more than a split second, 500 milliseconds, and that's how long it takes to do something consciously. And that when you're a fast thinker, you don't bother consciously thinking, you just operate automatically. So at the opposite end of the spectrum, we have developed all kinds of mean names for people that don't seem to be very sensitive, to put it mildly. And it could be just their neural substrates. It, you know,
Yeah, well,
No,
that is
it's just-
really interesting. I hadn't learned any of that before, so thank you so much for sharing that. Can you also share with us what you have been doing to try and secure safe housing?
yes, so I have been bankrupted by this situation, and I have turned to the state, and also part of the strategy is that I think the state should become more aware, and that we should all be reaching out and making them notice what is happening to at least the minority. And so I'm working with the housing authority here in Cambridge in the Boston area, and I'm also reaching out to people responsible for fairness in housing and civil rights. And I have secured some help, like, but it's been very difficult because we haven't been reaching out. And so I've developed a habit of just, even though they don't want to hear about it, but just be patient. As Deb Hartson mentioned, that a lot of people that they don't believe, and at first they have their doubts, and you just have to keep saying, just pointing out what's happening, and slow them down, and just keep mentioning. I think especially in high density areas, people are overwhelmed and they don't realize what the Wi-Fi is doing to them. And it's tens of billions of volts a second, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah, the
like your
gigahertz,
heart operates on
gigahertz means a billion.
3.
Mm.
3 hertz, your heart on 3 hertz. So all these kids that are dying of myocarditis, is that the word? Heart attack, little kids? And there are ads now trying to normalize that for little kids having heart attacks, like 4-year-olds. What is this? And they're blaming it all on the COVID and on the vaccines, and nobody is looking at these. We're basically living in a giant electric chair.
Yeah, well, Allison, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And again, you're my hero, and let me know if there's anything more I can do to help you.
Thank you.
All right,
All right, Cece, Deborah had a question. She had her hand up.
great, Deborah. What you got?
Do you still have a question, Deborah? There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I live on Cape Cod, and I've talked to Cece, I think a few years ago, about getting the awareness for the towns of the possible cell towers of 5G. I don't know if there are any here. I don't have a 5G phone, and I stay away from technology and everything. But my question is, I'm overwhelmed about, you keep on saying don't do it alone. And I've tried to talk to the health department, and one of the people, my dentist is on the board of health of the town. And I tried talking to him, but I get emotional, and I don't know facts, and I'm elderly, so my brain doesn't take the facts in. Are there people on the Cape? Do you know any groups on the Cape?
Yes, I do.
Okay, if you can send me that information, and then I can get in touch with them, and then hopefully they can go to town with me.
Okay, Deborah, can you shoot me a quick email, and I will introduce you to the Centerville Concerned Citizens. They have built a groundswell of several hundred people at the Cape who are tuning into this, and hopefully they'll be able to help you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Shirley. Nice to see you again. How are things going down in Florida?
I'm just getting back into action again, so I've been laying low because of the personal impacts on my family of these kinds of transmissions. So
Well, it's nice to see you again. Welcome back and let us know if there's anything we can do to help. All right, any other questions or comments from our wonderful participants?
actually, Cece, I would like to make a comment.
Sure.
I realize how, and I think I have made this perhaps once before, but it is difficult. It is difficult to raise these issues, and people are, deer in the headlights. But I will say, for instance, my next door neighbor last month died of a glioblastoma.
Oh,
He and his wife, he knew his wife was very sensitive. We worked together years ago to reduce to make sure that there was an opt out for the smart meter that was put onto their house.
mhm.
But he thought that this nice little heart shaped thing that he put in his office, he was an attorney. He moved his office into his home, um, and I went over and measured, and the microwatts per meter squared were up to the 3 millions
Oh, my
when
gosh.
Wow.
when the fax machine was working. He had double. Comcast had told him, oh, he can do his family and friends inputs, and then his business inputs. He basically had over 4 routers within 3.5 feet of his desk. He was as healthy as, all of the things that you do for a human body to be healthy. He did those things, but within a few years of sitting in his office, 6 to 8 hours a day,
Mhm.
he died within 3 months. He was a
Oh.
wonderful man. And so his next door neighbor, because we're next door neighbors, we always talked in the yard. We
Mhm.
didn't happen to go into each other's houses because we always met outside and had wonderful conversations. And I helped his wife, and when he moved his office back, he had a deck phone, and she felt something, and I went over with my meters, and immediately we took the deck phone down. We had a replacement. We keep extras in the garage, and he did that, but he believed the counseling of his wireless company as to what it was, his internet company, as to what he should have in his office, and he didn't know
Oh,
what he was doing to himself.
Shirley, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry you lost your neighbor. It sounds like he was a wonderful man. Yeah, it's all we can do is provide the information.
And sometimes speak up a little more than you think is polite.
Yeah.
It wasn't, he died, a month ago. I haven't been able to get back into the house to adjust the equipment in that office. It's on the far side of the house. And finally, yesterday, when I was talking to his wife, she came over. She was feeling so not good and dizzy and all. And I said, Linda, unless we go in there, it seems overwhelming, but unless we go in there and measure, I cannot do anything to allow you to make a choice that might improve how you feel.
Mhm.
And she first said something, she was a bit exasperated, but an hour later she called me up on the phone and she apologized to me, and she said, Shirley, would you come over this week and measure so we can, I want to feel better.
Good. Good. That persistence pays off. Polite and loving, right? From the heart.
From loving, even though it was far much more of a push.
Yeah, and it does, and it
It's my
takes
opinion.
us way out of our comfort zone. It takes us out of our comfort zone to have to do that, but so, you just have to read the situation. And if they push away, they push away, but at least she knew she could come back to you and say, gosh, you're making a lot of sense. Let's see what we might be able to do. So what a lovely way to support the widow,
So
and
keep at it.
yeah, and I wanted to give you a shout out too, because you've been in education your whole career and you were derailed a bit by EMS, but you didn't stop. You've been working with your school districts and trying to help get them. So I know we can only do so much in a given day or a given week or month, but thank you for everything you've done on that front too.
Absolutely.
All right. Was there anybody else who wanted to share tonight?
I think Deborah had her hand up again, so go ahead. Deborah, do you have another question?
Expertise in sharing everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't quite catch
We
all
didn't
that.
hear you, yes.
You didn't hear me?
No.
Oh, I wanted to say thank you to Cece for all your work and all your information and your dedication to this. And I get your emails all the time and I read them. And I was on the last week's seminar, the Massachusetts thing, and tonight, and just your presentations and everything. And it's very clear. I just thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. And you know what? I just feel so lucky to be able to do this work. I did my bachelor's in communication, and then I did my master's in technical and professional writing, and I never imagined I would walk away from my career to do this work. But I'm so grateful to have this skill set that I can help others with. And I'm the youngest of 10 kids, so I popped out of the womb having to deal with a lot of stuff going on and a lot of different personalities and learning to work peaceably with everybody. So I'm just grateful for the background that I had, and I just happened to get a pretty good start on most people. And if we can work together to move that needle to safe technology, then our world will be a better place for it. So thank you. All right, everybody. Well, listen, you have a good, safe evening, and we will see you next time. We'll be announcing some new things that are coming up for October, and we'll put out the flyer for the October forums pretty soon too. So thanks, everybody. Sweet dreams.
Thank you, Cece.
All right, Deb, thanks for sticking in there with us. I hope you get better day by day here.
I'm sure I will.
Thank you, Cece. So appreciate.